Great, welcome everyone. Thank you all for coming. My name is Alinda Vermeer. I'm a legal officer at Privacy International. I'm here with John Campbell, who's a senior lecturer in the anthropology of development at SOAS, with a special interest in Ethiopia and Eritrea. On my other side is Tadesse Biru, who's a Ethiopian refugee who's residing here in the UK. And next to Tadesse is his lawyer, Mark Scott, who's a partner at Bat Murphy Solicitors. We're here today because we made a criminal complaint on behalf of Tadesse, asking the National Cybercrime Unit of the National Crime Agency to investigate the potentially unlawful interception of Tadesse's communications via a Trojan that we found on his computer. And we're also asking the National Cybercrime Unit to investigate the role played by a British company that developed the technology that we found on Tadesse's computer. Now, this Trojan is called FinSpy. It has been developed by a company called Gamma International. Citizen Lab, which is a interdisciplinary research lab at the University of Toronto in Canada, has done an enormous amount of research into this particular type of surveillance technology. They've published a number of reports on FinFisher, showing how it works and that it has been found in 36 countries across the world, including countries such as Turkmenistan, Bahrain, and Ethiopia. What they've showed more specifically is that FinFisher has been found as part of a FinFisher campaign that targets political opposition members from Ethiopia, and more specifically members of Ginbot7, the political party in exile that Tadesse is a member of. And what they've described is that this FinFisher campaign uses pictures of senior Ginbot7 members in an email that is then sent to people they're interested in, and that can be used to infect their computers with this Trojan called FinSpy. Now, Tadesse read one of these reports and approached us in April of last year, asking us to scan his computer for the presence of this malware. So we examined his computer together with Bill Markzak, who is a research fellow at the Citizen Lab and has extensive experience in identifying FinFisher. And we found files on Tadesse's computer that were similar to files that Bill had found earlier, and that indicated that FinSpy had been active on his computer. Now, what this means is that this Trojan has been active on Tadesse's computer sometime in the summer of 2012, and this means that during that time, the person operating the Trojan has had total access to Tadesse's computer. So it was possible for them to access his email correspondence, to remotely switch on the camera or the microphone of his computer to extend the surveillance to what's happening around the computer in the privacy of Tadesse's home. They could go through all the data held on the computer, all the documents, and take out whatever was of interest. What is also possible with this type of technology is to listen in on Skype calls that you're having. And Tadesse has informed me that Skype is a program that he uses very often to stay in touch with other members of Ginbot7, and more specifically other members of the executive committee of Ginbot7. Given that he uses his computer such a great deal, both for his political activities, but also personally and in his work as a university lecturer, the fact that we found such a Trojan on his computer is a huge invasion of his privacy, and also breaches his political rights. And given that Tadesse is a refugee here in the UK, and that the UK has a particular responsibility to protect Tadesse from measures being taken against him by the Ethiopian government, we have asked today for this investigation into the unlawful interception of his communications and the potential role that Gamma International had in the offense by developing this perfect interception tool called FinSpy. Now, Tadesse, do you want to talk a bit about your experiences?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. My name is Tadesse. I came to this country, United Kingdom, in 2009. And before I came to Ethiopia, I have been living and working in Ethiopia, my home country. I worked as a lecturer at university and college. I have been politically active in Ethiopia. And my wife is also a politically active person. And in 2005, my wife has participated in election, and she was a candidate in Addis Ababa city government. And the election was won by the then opposition party, CUDP, that is Coalition for Unity, Democracy, Coalition for Unity and Democracy. But the government reverted the election outcome and declared itself a winner. Also, it has been beaten severely. And as it should have been expected, people protested against the government's decision, and they took to the streets. And the government killed more than 200 people on the streets of Addis Ababa and major cities. And something like 40,000 people were arrested, were deported to the desert area infected by malaria. And this type of atrocities we have seen in the old days, probably in fascist Germany. In recent day, probably we can find similarities in Serbia, Montenegro. And we have this type of government, which is a racist and fascist type of government. I have been arrested in Ethiopia several times for a short period of time, and I have never been formally prosecuted. But there were repeated detention and repeated harassments. At one specific time, a person told me to tell to my relatives to search for my dead body in the streets because they are fed up of arresting people. And I knew in Ethiopia that my telephone has been tapped continuously because at every possible moment someone can call me and tell me where I am located. And I had friends in Ethiopian telecommunications who told me that my telephone has been continuously tapped. There was no other possibility even to search to find other SIM cards. At that time, it has been more difficult to buy an automobile than to buy a SIM card, because in order to buy a SIM card, you have to register, a lot of registration was required. And the whole telecommunication system in Ethiopia used more as a spying tool rather than as communication tool. But in Ethiopia, I live with it, and it is continuous intimidation, continuous harassment, continuous following, pursuing. But, well, we just survived from 2005 until 2008, at the end of 2008. At the beginning of 2009, it was totally unbearable, and we have to escape to a safer place. And we came to United Kingdom, and I thank to the government of United Kingdom because our asylum application was positively responded very quickly. In less than a month, we get a positive outcome. I'm very grateful. I felt that I am living now in a safe country, and I try to forget about all what happened in Ethiopia. And because I felt that here, UK is a safe country and a free country, but I was wrong. And I feel very disappointed because I'm very angry. When I learned about this, I was very angry. I'm still angry because even in this country, that is a government, a barbaric government, a racist and fascist government is pursuing me not only inside the country, but also outside the country. And what was infringed, it was not in only my personal privacy, but also UK's, United Kingdom's national interest, because they are spying somebody in somebody else's country, in United Kingdom territory. And I feel that this is a huge misdoing it anyway. Well, now I hope that the United Kingdom, the government of the United Kingdom, will investigate this issue. It is not only my personal liberty, but also the UK's interest and the liberty of other Ethiopian citizens living in the United Kingdom. I have always tried to contribute to the betterment of Ethiopia by promoting liberal democracy and freedom of speech, and I try to defend human rights in Ethiopia. And it is for this activity that I have been persuaded, I have been intimidated for so long, and it continued. And the United Kingdom government should understand, and I hope it will understand, that it is in the interest of the UK government to investigate and to stop these activities. And to add one more important point is to remind you that Ethiopia is one of the poorest countries in the world. And most probably, the money that they are using for purchasing these malwares and spywares is obtained from UK's aid money. It is very possible that they are using aid money. Even if they don't use aid money, it should be considered as such, because there are many priorities for Ethiopia. We don't have enough food. We don't have enough education. It is one of the least literate countries in the world. The illiteracy rate is something like 60%, but they spend millions on spywares. And we have to stop this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tadesse. John, do you maybe want to say a few things?
Yes, I've been, well, I want to make it clear first that I'm not involved in the preparation of this case. Privacy International has asked me to come as an expert on the Horn of Africa to provide some context against which to see the development of this particular case. It should be very clear, because there is abundant evidence on the public record, that Ethiopia's human rights record has been extremely poor since the creation of the regime in 1991. But the key issues before us today relate to the May 2005 national elections. So there are a number of points which arise from that and surrounding which relate to the creation of Ginbot7, right, which are important to make. As Ato Tadesse has said, the 2005 elections created a number of reactions by the sitting government in Ethiopia. It set aside the elections and considerable electoral wins in the national elections, particularly in Addis Ababa in 2005. It also repressed extensive street demonstrations, and it detained a number of the political opposition figures involved with the 2005 elections. It was following the 2005 elections, sometime around 2008, I understand, that Ginbot7 was developed, primarily in the United States, right? But it is largely an opposition political party which is based primarily in the extensive Ethiopian diaspora across Europe and the United States and elsewhere. It is now an alliance of opposition parties. It has a much broader political alliance than it did in the 2005 elections. And it has been established or supported by a number of fairly prominent opposition politicians from those involved in the elections and from other parties which at the 2005 elections were barred or refused to take part in the elections. Its program, and this is material which is available on the internet, its political program does not exclude violence in relation to overthrowing the current state and Ethiopia. And this is partly why it has been targeted by the regime there, right? Ginbot7 makes it clear that its position is in relation to its view that the electoral processes are unfair in Ethiopia, and therefore it has no chance of gaining any support. It has its precise influence within Ethiopia is not clear. Various claims have been made about the extent of its influence within the country, most of which is not accurately documented. However, the regime in Addis Ababa is very concerned about this particular political party, and that's evidenced in a number of roundups and arrests which have taken place since 2009. In 2009, 44 individuals were arrested for planning a military coup, and in addition, some, at least, of these individuals were accused of being members of Ginbot7, though the evidence for that seems to be fairly light. Of these individuals, 5 were sentenced to death, 33 were sentenced to life imprisonment, and 2 were sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. In March 2011, 114 journalists and opposition politicians were arrested again in Addis Ababa, primarily. This includes 24 individuals accused of belonging to Ginbot7. At least one of these individuals tried was actually illegally abducted from the Sudan and brought to stand trial in Addis Ababa. So there are clearly issues of grave human rights violations and injustices being pursued here. It is understood that the evidence filed against these individuals, which diplomatic sources in Addis described as flimsy, included, and this is a key issue in relation to the filing of this case, that the evidence included contact via social media websites on the internet with individuals who were affiliated with Ginbot7. It also involved intercepts of emails sent into exile by G7 to individuals in Ethiopia. And it involves transmissions via Ethiopian satellite television, supposedly submitting or sending in political propaganda supportive of Ginbot7 into the country. In June 2012, 24 of these individuals, first arrested the previous year, were found guilty and given prison sentences of 8 years to life imprisonment. A number of these individuals have been tried in absentia, that is, they have not been present at their own trials. Now, this has significant implications for asylum policy and practice in the UK and elsewhere. If this case is found to be true and there's surveillance via this finware program, this has extensive implications for the police and for the Home Office. And there are 2 key areas here. In the current asylum case law in 2004, the Immigration and Asylum Tribunal found in a case relating to opposition movements in Ethiopia, but people who had fled to the UK, that the Ethiopian embassy were undertaking surveillance on political dissidents in the London area and more widely. If the substance of this case is also proved, it creates serious problems for what are called surplus refugee claims. That is, for individuals whose activities outside of their country of origin are being spied upon and whose lives are being placed at jeopardy. Right? So it could create a number of new refugee asylum claims, which, if this finware is found to be effective and being used, right, will lead to increasing asylum claims in the UK, in the US, and Canada, and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, John. From Privacy International's broader perspective, we think this is, of course, a very shocking case, but it's also an important issue that may be relevant to a lot more people than just Tadesse here. This particular technology allows governments to track down people that have fled their countries because, for instance, their human rights activities, their political activities, or working there, for instance, as a journalist. And the fact that this technology allows that is very scary, which is why we think it's very important that this is investigated. This is not the first time that Fin Fisher comes up on PI's radar. We've called for multiple investigations that are ongoing at the moment. They focused on the export, and what we haven't seen so far is that someone is being targeted here in the UK with this specific technology. Mark, have you got anything to add, or shall we go over to questions?
I think just to cut a very few points. You know, it's right that the issues raised in this case are sort of worrying and potentially quite complex, but in some senses the law is quite simple. That if your computer is in the UK and it's intercepted with, if that's without lawful authority, that's a crime. And to the extent to which there was no lawful authority, which it appears very difficult to see what lawful authority there could be for the interception of Tadesse's computer, that would be unlawful and a crime. And so therefore it's very important that the police undertake a proper investigation into this matter.
Any questions?
What stage is your complaint up to? I mean, that's been put forward. Is that being put forward today, or when?
It's been put forward today. Yeah.
So have you had any response so far? Or?
No, it's too early for that. It's been sent by mail.
Okay.
What's kind of your former complaints to do with FinFisher software? I know specifically the export.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was last year.
Yeah, that's right. So we've brought the export of FinFisher under the attention of HMRC, asking them to investigate whether these exports were legal. We are aware that FinFisher requires an export license because of the level of cryptography that it uses. We were also informed by the Department of Business Information and Skills that such a license has not been sought by Gamma International as of September 2012. So we've asked for an investigation of the exports that have taken place prior to that moment that may have been illegal. We've also pointed out that the Citizen Lab of the University of Toronto have found FinFisher command and control servers in 36 countries across the world. So that investigation is ongoing. We have also asked the UK National Contact Point of the OECD to investigate whether the export of FinFisher to Bahrain was in accordance with the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, and then in particular the chapter on human rights, which for instance requires companies to have a human rights policy in place and to do human rights due diligence before they export their products. Yes?
I'm delighted, sorry, can I ask a question? What outcome do you expect out of this investigation is for Linda and Mark, from sort of private point of view? What remedy do you expect on behalf of Tadesse?
Yeah. Yes. Well, for now we hope that the case will be investigated and hopefully that those responsible will be prosecuted at some point if it turns out there's sufficient evidence for that. We hope that both the role of the person unlawfully intercepting Tadesse's communications and the role of the company in developing this technology and thereby potentially assisting the offense is investigated, and that they, if it turns out there's enough evidence, that they will be held responsible for that.
Sorry to come back. Their claim is they're doing this for reasons of national security.
Mm-hmm.
So are we trying to sort of, we're trying to say, no, it is not for national security, it's against sort of inflicting on private sort of citizens.
Just in terms of that, in respect of an interception of communication in the UK, it would be no answer for a criminal matter for them to say it's a matter for Ethiopian national security. They would have to have lawful authority to do what they're doing in the UK. and unless they've got authority under the Regulation of Investigation Powers Act, which doesn't seem possible, that the interception of any communication in the UK would be unlawful. In relation to the question about remedy, at this stage, the remedy is to have an investigation, and if there's sufficiency of evidence, to have a prosecution, and to be involved, for Tadesse to be involved as the victim of any unlawful interception of his communication, to be informed about what's going on with the case regularly, and to have an understanding of the process, and then to the extent to which there is a criminal prosecution, to be involved in that.
Any other questions? Yes?
I think actually my question is a bit technical.
Mm-hmm.
How do people like myself, critics of the government, know if we are surveilling? I mean, if we are under surveillance, how do we know?
Well, the difficult thing about this specific type of surveillance technology is that it is designed not to be noticed. So it won't be picked up by your antivirus software. You won't notice that it's active on your computer. The only thing you can do to protect yourself is to be very careful with the updates, for instance, of software that you accept, because we know that sometimes this program uses fake software updates to install this malware on the computer, or for instance with emails that you're sent, such as the one that used the pictures of Ginbot7 members to infect users. It could also be, for instance, if you're a journalist, it could be disguised as a scoop, and if you click on the document that is attached, or if you click on a link, your computer may get infected. So if those type of updates or emails don't look trustworthy, I would be very careful with opening these. Yeah.
Well, we say Ethiopia is one of the poorest countries in the world, and how much is it likely to cause the Ethiopian government to buy this virus and to mark? Is it illegal to sell these viruses to dictator governments in the world?
Shall I just deal with that question first? The position is that if software such as the FinSpy needs to be exported to Ethiopia or to another country outside the European Union, it requires an export license. And so without an export license, it would be unlawful to export. Insofar as the information that we have, there has been no export license granted for the sale of Finfisher to Ethiopia or to indeed any country outside the European Union. So to the extent to which it was exported, that would be unlawful as a breach of export control.
And the other question, I must admit that I don't know the exact amount, but I can look that up and I'll get in touch with you and let you know. Any other questions?
Yeah, hi, it's
Hi.
Rafael here with the Associated Press. I have a question for Mr. Kessler and any of you actually. Are you able to pinpoint any actual harm that's resulted from this surveillance? That is to say, are you aware of any specific conversation or any contact within the country that may have been compromised? Leaving aside from the issue of law breaking and invasion of privacy, has there been harm done to others that you're aware of?
Tadesse, do you want to answer it?
Yeah. Yeah, there have been several occasions that we were astonished to find a few documents which resemble documents I had. They were posted in a pro-government website, IGA forum, and several times I found several times that it's not the exact document, but with edited type, but at least some part is from my computer, and it was re-edited and edited in such a way that it will serve their own purpose. And it is most likely that they have taken from my computer, and they have rewritten them in a way that will serve their own purpose. and posted them as if they found it somehow in a different way, so somehow using their own means. That is on document part. But there have been also videos, audios. One important audio that has created a lot of noise among the Ethiopian community was a conversation made by the chairman of Ginbot7 with a few other people, including myself. And in that, there are few sound bites which were correct, but others somehow pasted and twisted in a very subtle way to indicate as if there are some relationship with either Egyptian government or Eritrean government, somehow spinned towards that and posted as in a pro-government website.
And I'm sorry, one follow-up question. With regards to these audio, these clips that were taken, do you know they were taken from a conversation? But where did this conversation happen? Was it?
It happened on Skype conversation.
Yeah.
And it was a conversation on a few Ginbot7 executive committee members. And we were 7 of us, some were in the United States, and 2 of us in UK and 1 in Belgium. And it's not the complete, it's not the whole conversation is not the correct one, as I said. That is, some sound bites are taken and some are added and twisted in a way that will serve their own purpose. And that was probably the most important damaging part, because before we knew about Philly Fisher, it started, we started to look into us, who might have done this one. It started, and the purpose was that, the main purpose probably was that to create suspicion among the executive committee members.
And it sounds like it did create suspicion.
It did create it to some extent. That we were somehow. Obviously, you have to ask this question: how could it happen? Because it was done by us. We know each other, but it leaked somehow. And some of the voices are correct, some are not. But you can ask how it happened, and then this is the whole purpose, in order to create suspicion among the opposition groups. And can I add some few things related with some other things?
Sure.
I just want to comment something related with the prisoners in Ethiopia. Yes, as respected Dr. Hayat has mentioned, many people have been arrested as members of Ginbot7 in Ethiopia, but most of them are, if it is in Europe, these people are arrested to reasons that they have to be appreciated. For example, one of the journalists, Riota Lemu, a young journalist lady, she was arrested and first sentenced for 14 years and then for 7 years, just because she took photographs and sent to a website. And the court declared that she is member of Ginbot7, and that act was described as an act of terrorism. And the only thing that she did was taking photographs and sent. The photographs were simply a protest photograph. And this type of activities which you can, and then another example, Iskandar Nagga, a journalist, a very known journalist, who was awarded European, he was twice award winner of journalist, Iskandar. He gave a lecture on human rights issues to youngsters, and that was the only reason why he sentenced for life. And these are the things that, when it is reported that people are arrested for conspiracy against government, it may look like something substantial was happened, but actually nothing. In Ethiopia, I have been a lecturer for the whole of my life. And in Ethiopian universities, you cannot mention even a topic on human rights issues. Even in development issues, you can deliver water, but you can't talk about the right for having water. You can deliver food. You cannot talk about the right of having food. Nothing related about human rights, nothing related about the issues related with the right issues. That is one of the things that development workers are finding very difficult to work in Ethiopian conditions, because it is actually impossible to deliver development activities without mentioning issues related with rights. And no rights, but gives the service. Even for the European governments, like the UK development agents, what the Ethiopian government is saying is that give us money and never mention about the right issues. This is what they call it, opposition activity, opposition politics. But this is not opposition politics. This is basic human rights issues.
Yes.
Yeah, Linda, actually, is it your first time to refer such a case to the NATO? Did you refer one in the past? And if you did, what was the outcome? What should we expect? It's a shame we are being quiet, even though we are away.
This is the first time we've made such a complaint to the National Cybercrime Unit, asking them to investigate. We have never helped anyone bring such a complaint before. Our previous calls for investigation have focused on the export and were aimed at HMRC and the OECD National Contact Point here in the UK. Yes?
This to Mr. Mark. If all this to be true, and if Dr. Tadesse probably be in contact with other people then back home, and surely they'll be at risk. So, will there be any legal protection from the UK government?
In terms of Tadesse's computer, to the extent to which the communication was intercepted, then that, as I said, would be a crime in the UK. To the extent to which that protection can then apply to people that might have been affected in Ethiopia, it's difficult to see as a matter of law as to how they could be protected by the UK.
Just a question for Mark. You mentioned that this is the first time PI made such a complaint, but is there any precedent for such a complaint being carried forward and getting results? And if so, what was that result and how long did it take?
Well, obviously the whole issue of interference with communications has been a sort of big issue with respect to the press. And so there's been cases primarily about phone interference, but as I understand it, there's also been arrests in relation to interference with computers, which I'm not sure to the extent to which whether they've been charged yet, but there's certainly been some arrests in connection with that in the UK. I'm not aware of any other case in respect of a political refugee who's been spied on by the country for which he's fled because of persecution, so I'm not aware of any other case like this.
Thank you very much, Dr. John. Could you just first tell me what you teach at the STARS?
I'm an anthropologist at the School of Oriental and African Studies, and my focus is on the Horn of Africa, development, refugees, issues related to that.
Right. You seem to have lots of information about what happened since 2005 until now in Ethiopia. So how is your feeling about after all of that happened and there's nothing changed in Ethiopia so far?
What is my feeling? Well, one of the issues which I've dealt with in response to that is I do what's called expert reports for individuals fleeing Ethiopia who are seeking asylum in the UK or indeed in the US or Canada, right? So I see a number of claims by people like Tadesse, right? And then I provide what's called a written expert report about the plausibility of the case and the conditions back in Ethiopia. So the key issue is that conditions of political persecution for people involved in the political opposition remain severe, right? And I would expect the British courts, where my reports are submitted to take that into consideration in assessing their asylum application. I have very little to say in relation to the government in Addis Ababa, right? But I'm aware of a number of broader human rights issues which are not going away, right? But the government doesn't talk to academics, so.
Well, all this research you make, is there any chance of getting those research to the UK government? Because the UK government seems to be working very closely with the Ethiopian government.
Well, I publish my work, and last year I published a book in relation to the Ethiopian government's arrest and deportation of ethnic Eritreans during the war with Eritrea, and that book is in the public press, right? So feel free to talk about it, right? It's available. I've also published elements of this of that book elsewhere in other professional journals. So it's very clear that at least in relation to ethnic Eritreans at the time of the war and currently, a number remain stateless, without status in Ethiopia. Many who were dispossessed of their property remain poor and impoverished in Ethiopia. And there seems very little intention of the government to provide measures of restitution for these individuals who are unfairly accused of complicity with the Eritrean government in the war, and who were stripped of their property, arrested, deported without a fair trial. Right? Many are now back in Ethiopia illegally, and the question for the current government is whether they will give them status and provide restitution for the property that was seized from them.
Well, talking of development, but Ethiopia is one of the poorest country, and Ethiopia live on aid money, and there's lots of debts. And then now Ethiopian government seem to be spending lots of money on this spy virus. What do you say about that?
Well, it's not clear where the money comes from. As you're well aware, Ethiopia is kind of working its way up from amongst the world's poorest to middle-income country. They have a number of exports, coffee and other things, which could be earning foreign exchange, which may have been used for this. But I think we need to await the outcome of the police investigation to find out precisely what has happened. Right? And
you personally think that money should be spent on this when we still have lack of food and lack of water and lack of education and hospital?
No, this should not be a priority, should it? A state, whether it's the British state or the Ethiopian state, should not be spying on its nationals. Right? This is a violation of the most basic human rights of all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could you just tell us a bit more about Privacy International?
Yes, Privacy International is a charity located here in the UK. We've been around for the last 20 years, fighting to promote the right to privacy.
So how do you think you're going to take? How far are you going to take this case?
Well, we're in the very early stages. So right now what we've done is we've filed a complaint and asked the National Cybercrime Unit of the National Crime Agency to investigate this case. And we will be there to provide more information if they would like that. And we leave it up to them to take it from here.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
ተመልካቾቻችን አሁን እዚህ የምንገኘው በፕራይቬሲ ኢንተርናሽናል በተዘጋጀው በሚዲያ ኢቨንት ወይም ፕሬስ ኮንፈረንስ ላይ ነው። እዚህ ዛሬ እንግዲህ በዶክተር ታደሰ ላይ በተገኘው ፊሸር በተባለው የስፓይንግ ቫይረስ ሁኔታ ላይ የደረሱበትን ሁኔታ ሊገልጹ ነው እዚህ የተገኙት። እዚህ ከመጡት እንግዶች አንዳንዶቹን ለመግለጽ ያህል ዶክተር ጆን ካምፔል ስኩል ኦፍ ኦሪየንታል ኤንድ አፍሪካን ሲኒየር ሌክቸረር ነው። አሊንዳ ቬንመር እዚሁ የፕራይቬሲ ኢንተርናሽናል ሲኒየር ማናጀር ነች። አቶ ማርክ ስኮት የዚህ ሀገር ሶሊሲተር ኬዙን የያዘው ነው። እንግዲህ በዛሬው ቆይታቸው ላይ እንዴት መጀመሪያ እንዴት ቫይረሱን እንዳገኙት ዶክተር ታደሰ ኮምፒውተር ላይ ከዛም በኋላ ደግሞ ከህግ ጋር እንዴት አያይዘው ስቴትመንታቸውን ሰርተው ወደ ህግ ወደሚያስፈልገው ህግ ቦታ እንዳደረሱትና ወደፊት ምን ያህል በዚህ ጉዳይ ላይ እንደሚሄዱበት የተነጋገሩበት ሲሆን አንዳንድ ግለሰቦች እንደ ዶክተር ጆን ከ2005 ጀምሮ ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ የነበረውን የጨቋኝ አገዛዝና የተገደሉትን የታሰሩትን ሁሉ እዚህ ዛሬ በሰፊው ፕሬዘንት አድርጓልና ይሄ ሊመጣ መቻሉ አዲስ ነገር እንዳልሆነ የገለጸበት ነው። ሌሎችም እንደዚሁ የራሳቸውን አስተያየት ገልጸዋል። በሰፊው በለንደን ኢሳት ስቱዲዮ በሰፊው ቃለ መጠይቅ ሊሰጡን ቃል ገብተዋል። ለዛሬው መታሰቢያ ቀጸላ ከለንደን